What happened to Japan?
For many people, Japan still shines as the ultimate success story. And while there's some truth to that image, it doesn't mean the country is free from deep-rooted crises. In 2024, the number of births fell below 700,000. That's the lowest number in decades. And although many experts argue immigration could be the remedy, Japan's newly elected Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi says plainly, "We will not replace Japanese citizens with migrants." And that's only one of many crises gnawing at Japan. For nearly all of modern history, Japan was a model of the meticulous precision it became famous for. This is where cars and electronics that flooded the world came from. Brands like Toyota, Sony, or Mitsubishi are still among the most recognizable on the planet. Their products became symbols of quality that built the country's reputation for decades. But there is another side to this story. While it's true that Japanese brands still profit largely from their products, it's getting more and more clear that they have remained stuck in the hardware era. Japan never put up a real fight with software giants like Google, Apple, or Amazon. In this new digital AI revolution, others are dealing the cards. And as a result, Japan's share of global GDP is steadily shrinking. You could say that perfection in manufacturing has become a brake on risk-taking and innovation. And there's more. Japan is long among the fastest aging countries in the developed world. Fewer and fewer people are working, while more and more are drawing pensions. That's one of the biggest reasons why the government has to take on new debt. After the property and stock bubble burst at the turn of the 1980s and 1990s, Japan fell into a deflationary trap. Companies postponed investment, and the government propped up demand with public spending. It worked in the short term, but it steadily addicted the economy to debt. Japan's public debt has now reached 237% of GDP. That's the highest rate in the developed world. Unfortunately, this trend could be observed for years, which means that the problem is deeply rooted. The Bank of Japan for more than 3 decades kept interest rates really low, often at zero. It also printed money and bought bonds to prevent collapse. For a long time, it worked, kinda. But now the scale of the crisis looks too big to be managed the old-fashioned way. 30-year yields soared to a record 3.14%, and 40-year yields hit 3.6%. These are levels unseen in decades. On paper, that may look minor, but in practice, it's really dramatic. Every single percentage point means as much as an extra $85 billion in interest alone. That's about what Japan spends annually on defense. Add to that a weakening Japanese yen, deliberately pushed down for years to support exports. But for many ordinary families, it means shrinking purchasing power, and with it, a steadily declining quality of life. Even inflation has started to accelerate, despite staying low for nearly 4 decades. In just the last 3 years, inflation may have wiped out as much as 90 trillion yen in value. On top of that lies another problem: a serious shortage of workers. By 2060, the labor force is projected to fall drastically. That means fewer taxes and even more debt. Not to mention that with fewer people, Japan becomes far less likely to develop new technologies it needs to compete with the United States and China in the most cutting-edge sectors of the economy. And the comforting illusion of getting robots to do all the work for us most likely won't solve the issue. Automation will replace some factory hands, but it won't create new taxpayers, and it won't generate real domestic demand. Robots don't buy homes and don't raise children, at least not yet. The world around has changed. In Asia, China now leads. It sets the pace in exports and supply chains. All of that has forced Japan to balance between its military alliance with the United States and the risk of economic dependence on Beijing. The bill for all of that balancing is getting bigger. The ratio of military expenditure to GDP has risen sharply in the last 3 years, which squeezes the budget even further. All of that gives us an interesting perspective. Because if even a country as wealthy and well-organized as Japan is buckling under the weight of its own debts, then what hope is there for countries heading down the very same path? But an economy is just numbers. Behind every one of them stands a society. And it's the society that has become the weakest link in Japan's entire system. Behind all that technological perfection lies something people rarely talk about. The people who, worryingly, have lost the will to compete at all. According to the Health Ministry, as much as 1.5 million people are social recluses, hikikomori, meaning individuals who have shut themselves in their homes and haven't gone out in years. Often they don't work, don't study, and don't have a social life. They live their lives inside their room. Japan built what seemed as an ideal system, but as it turns out, the human being is not its component, but its victim. In 2021, the government created the Office for Policy on Loneliness and Isolation as a response to the post-pandemic surge in loneliness. Another commonly cited cause of Japan's worsening mental health crisis is its work culture, or more precisely, its culture of overwork. In Japan, overwork has actually become the norm. It is no accident that the Japanese language has the word karoshi, which basically means death from overwork. Sadly, it's not a metaphor. Death from overwork is an official category on government forms. Years of long shifts, little sleep, constant stress, and high usage of caffeine often end the same way, with heart attacks or even strokes. Meanwhile, women face a choice. They either go with a career or a family. And in a society that demands perfection in every role, many end up struggling with both. In Japan, women now have their first child at an average age of 31. So it's no coincidence that Tokyo is filling up with studio apartments. In Japan, loneliness has quietly become the norm. Forecasts say the population will fall from above 120 million to about 90 million by 2070. Fertility is down to about 1.2 children per woman. There are over 9 million vacant homes across the country. There's simply no new generation to take the baton. Ever older people prop up a system with hardly any young. We have to admit that Japan is clean and safe, but between its perfectly designed cities and offices spreads an emptiness, one that technology and money cannot fill. Sociologists often call it a shame society. If you fail, you're expected to disappear quietly, not because others could condemn you, but because you're ashamed to ask for help. This quiet perfectionism only further deepens the loneliness crisis. Where does this mentality come from? Why do Japanese prefer to suffer in silence rather than seek help? To understand modern Japan, you have to look at its entire history. Starting in 1603, the country spent over 250 years in the era known as the Edo period. During this time, Japan lived in voluntary isolation. It avoided foreigners and traded with almost no one. In fact, the only European nation allowed meaningful access was the Netherlands. Society was built on hierarchy and loyalty. The ruler stood above all, and an ordinary citizen was just a cog in a larger machine. That mentality endured for centuries. Even though today Japan has subways and bullet trains, its soul still lingers in a feudal system. After World War II, the country lay in ruins, but soon after, the Japanese achieved what the world called an economic miracle. In a single generation, they built modern factories and cities. Everyone knew their duty. People worked for the good of the company and for the good of the nation. Thus rose a post-war powerhouse that peaked in the 1980s. Brands like Sony, Toyota, and Panasonic dominated global markets. American and German brands started to lose their market share. For a moment, it seemed Japan was taking over the world. History, though, loves irony. 1985, the Plaza Accord. Under US pressure, Japan agreed to strengthen the yen. That made exports more expensive, and factories started to lose competitiveness. The government responded with cheap credit, and the speculative bubble began. Japan's flagship stock index, the Nikkei 225, climbed to 39,000 points. Then, within months, it all burst. The nation's wealth vanished from the ledgers. Thus began what economists later called the lost decade. But that decade in the end has lasted over 25 years. Only now has the Nikkei begun to recover the levels last seen in 1990. Yet even today, it's clear that many companies have stopped taking risks. A country that once chased the world now hesitates to take even a single step forward. Japan remains stuck in the age of perfect hardware, not software. It never managed to build its own digital champions or shift its economy toward modern services. Instead, it became a land of conservative corporations, where products are crafted to meet internal standards rather than to conquer markets and shape the global game. And the Japanese perfection, once its greatest weapon, now turned into its biggest prison. Then came political stagnation. Since 1955, virtually the same political party has ruled the stage. The Liberal Democratic Party. Prime ministers change, but the mindset stays the same. A system they once built did provide stability, but now it stands in the way of reform. And this political stagnation is one of the reasons the younger generation is voting less and less. Perhaps that's where the story of its decline begins. Maybe Japan reached its ideal state and simply had nowhere left to go. Japanese people have survived wars and natural disasters, but now they're facing something entirely different: their own identity crisis. And here lies the biggest taboo in contemporary Japan: migration. Japan knows it is shrinking. It also knows it cannot stop this on its own. Yet, even now, it would rather remain the way it always was.
一遍ゼロベースで考えるつもりです。毎年毎年、私たちと文化や何もかもがあんまりにも違う人たちをまとめて入れていくということ。この政策は一旦考え直さなあきません。経済的な動機でやってきて難民を主張する人、きちんとお帰りをいただきます。また、不法滞在の人たちにも厳格に法律を守っていただきます。
In 2024, 3.8 million foreigners lived in Japan. That's a record number, but still, it's just 3% of the population. The numbers in similar economies like Germany or France are far higher. But still, inflows are rising by 10.5% year on year, mostly from China, the Philippines, Taiwan, and Korea. Nevertheless, Japan remains one of the most culturally homogeneous states on Earth. The new Prime Minister, Sanae Takaichi, stated openly that Japan will not compensate for its shrinking population with mass migration. And it looks like a deliberate choice. Japan does not want to repeat the mistakes of many Western countries. It does not want social tensions, parallel cultures, or religious conflict. It would rather shrink than change. This conservatism has deep roots. Like I said earlier, Japan for centuries identified foreigners as a threat. They remain secluded in the past, and even today, many believe national unity is a strength, and immigration weakens it. As a result, Japan's migration policy is exceptionally strict. Foreigners can come on temporary work visas, but these are often capped at 5 years, and the right to bring your family over is rarely granted. The paradox is that Japan could genuinely benefit from a well-planned immigration strategy. Many jobs are already filled by foreign workers, and without them, entire sectors would be struggling even more. Authorities are trying to find a compromise, but for many Japanese, diversity is not a value but a risk. They want their country to remain predictable and safe, even at the cost of further economic stagnation. But the inflow of foreigners to Japan still continues. Many people fly here not as migrants, but as tourists. In 2024, 36.9 million people visited Japan. Tourist numbers have been rising for a decade, but 2024 set an outright record. Tourism has become one of the main pillars of the economy, and now it contributes as much as the electronics industry. Success, however, has its price. Surveys show that about 60% of Japanese think tourism got out of control. Many residents simply can no longer live the way they used to. And while Japan can't be directly compared to places like Spain, which was visited by 94 million tourists in 2024, the numbers in Japan are still enormous. Kyoto, once a quiet city with pure Japanese culture, now has so many tourists that it's hard to even walk through most popular places. It's not ideal if you have to squeeze through crowds just to walk around a city.
ある程度のルールみたいのを自然に覚えていったら、そんなこともないんじゃないかなと思う。例えば、道路でどこにでも、昔はね、ゴミもちょっと捨てたりとか、そんなもあったかもしれませんけど、今はそういうのがだんだんなくなってきてると思います。
Even though visitors spend their money in Japan, tourism stopped being a point of pride and became a burden. Places like Kyoto or Hokkaido feel this shift the most. And while the state enjoys record revenues, more and more Japanese feel they're living in a country that no longer feels like their own. The cheap yen meant to draw tourists has become a curse. Those getting their paycheck in a different currency feel like everything is a bargain, while residents pay ever more for daily life. So let's zoom out and ask ourselves one question. What does the future hold for Japan? By 2045, 1/3 of the population will be over 65. The pension and healthcare systems already consume over 1/5 of GDP. Soon, there may be not only a lack of money, but a lack of people to care for an aging society. It's the harbinger of a quiet catastrophe. Japan stands before a choice. Two paths, neither leading to paradise. First is to open up to mass migration, to admit millions who would help to keep the money flowing, but at the same time, irreversibly change the country's identity. The second way is to preserve cohesion, even at the cost of decline. At the same time, Tokyo is preparing for a different kind of future. Tensions in the region keep rising. China is becoming wealthier and more militarized. North Korea still holds a massive nuclear arsenal, and even Russia has a long history of military conflict with Japan. All of this is pushing Japan to invest record sums in its defense. In 2024, military spending exceeded $50 billion, and the government says it will reach 2% of GDP within a few years. It's a really tough situation. A country that should be preparing for the consequences of a shrinking workforce instead feels compelled to pour record amounts of money into its military. It's safe to say that Japan could be a model for the entire world. The story of its success through discipline and hard work is true and admirable. But at the same time, today it is becoming a warning. And the country that should be paying closest attention to Japan's mistakes is South Korea. Just a few hundred kilometers away, Koreans are facing a similar fate. A rapidly shrinking population, and a political system weighed down by corruption and constant scandals. You can learn more about it in the video currently displayed on your screen.